Welcome back. In today's episode, we speak with Steve Robbins, the genius behind Get It Done Guy podcast, with over 23 million downloads. Is there really a downside to increasing your personal productivity? And how important is identity and what role does it play?
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy. Steve Robbins has created the online and in-person program, Live an Extraordinary Life. His program combines business savvy, life hacking, and personal development to help people make their lives extraordinary. His Get It Done Guy podcast has spent weeks at #1 in iTunes in the business category. It has over 23 million downloads. He has been interviewed in numerous publications, including the Wall Street Journal, NBC Nightly News, the New York Times, ABC News, Fox News, just to mention a few. He has written for the Harvard Business Review. He is the author of It Takes a Lot More of an Attitude to Lead a Stellar Organization, and Get It Done Guys, 9 Steps to Work Less and Do More, an Amazon Business and Investing Top 10 bestseller. He holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a BS in Computer Science from MIT. Please welcome Steve Robbins. Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, the one thing I left out in the bio was you were using the internet back in 1976. What was it like back in 1976?
It was very, very small. There were only 83 machines on it back when I used it, and I had them all memorized. The domain system didn't exist yet, and it was the interaction that went on it was extremely high quality because the only people who were involved in it were people who were researchers and or people at a small number of universities that were connected to it. It was a fascinating environment. I kind of want to say everyone knew each other, which is almost true. And I am amazed to see where it went. But it's been a wild ride, and it's always kind of funny because when people talk about, I've been using the internet forever, I'm like, really? How long? They say, since the mid-'90s. And I'm kind of like, by the time you were first introduced to the internet, I had already been using it longer than you've been alive. Like, thank you very much.
And I guess back then it was almost like you did have friends on the internet that you knew.
Well, actually, what happened is that I was raised in a traveling New Age commune, and if your mother or your father ever warned you about those weird kids on the other side of the tracks, that was me and my sister. We were the weird kids. And we never had any friends growing up. So, in fact, I first became introduced to the internet in 7th grade. And it wasn't called the internet at the time. It was called the ARPANET. And I made a whole bunch of friends who at the time were college students at MIT. And because, of course, back then you didn't have any kind of video. Everything was text-based. And in fact, it was on printing terminals. It wasn't on CRTs. You would type things, you would get rolls and rolls of paper. And you would have conversations with people by sending them instant messages, which, I hate to break it to every instant messaging program for the last 25 years, since that seems to be the one category of app that actually has been developed for the internet and has taken off wildly and does again every couple of years. It's basically the oldest technology on the entire ARPANET. I mean, there's been almost no innovation in it since 1976. But in 1976, I had a whole social life that consisted of all of these people who were at MIT. And ultimately, when it was time for me to go to college, that was why I chose MIT as my college, because I already knew a whole bunch of people there. And I was like, yay, I get to go be with my friends. Yay.
And what a great peer group as well.
It was a pretty amazing group of people, actually. And a lot of them subsequently created various pieces of the whole internet's infrastructure. I mean, in fact, to some degree, I did. I was the co-founder of a company called FTP Software in the 1980s, which helped create the software. One of the versions, we had competitors, but helped create the software that allowed IBM PCs to connect up to the internet. So if you used an IBM PC from about 1986 to about 1995, chances were greater than 1 and 2 that you were using software that I was involved in writing or marketing.
I'm old enough to remember that floppy disks actually were floppy.
Oh, yeah.
They were
There's
what, like
reason
9 by 9 or
disks.
12 by 12? They were huge.
Absolutely. Oh, there's, it's like trying to explain to a kid these days what it means to dial a phone.
Exactly.
They say dial a phone. What's that? And you say, you young whippersnappers, you don't know what a dial is. And they look at you and say, you're irrelevant. You're over 20.
That's right. I used to have one of those brick phones that you carried. It was about 8 pounds in a bag.
Oh yeah. I had never had one, but I've seen them. And I never thought they would amount to anything, of course. But
exactly. Who's going to carry a phone around with them all the time?
Geez, who would want that? I will say that one of the things that's been interesting about watching the whole arc of the internet is things develop very much in a different direction than you anticipate, and this has made me somewhat conservative in my middle age, because the one thing I have seen over and over and over again is that people's dreams of all the amazing things that a particular technology will do often end up being very different from what people end up using the technology. And we say, yay, Pokemon Go. Oh, look, that man's walking out into traffic. Why is he staring? Ooh, that didn't go down very well, did it now? But at least at least now I can grab the Pokemon that he was chasing.
That's right. Yeah, somebody's going to get sued off of that one.
Exactly. But anywho, yes. So I have been an internet user for a very long time.
That is amazing. Well, Steve, the first thing that gravitated me towards you was I love your podcast, the Get It Done Guy. I'm from Jersey, so I'm kind of a no-nonsense kind of guy. And when I moved down to Atlanta, Georgia, one of the favorite sayings down here is, I'm fixing to. And I remember talking to my employees, I said, look, if you spend that much time fixing to do it, why don't you just get it done? Tell us a little bit about why the start of that podcast and some of the things that you learned along the way.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I'd love to tell you that I saw some deep need in the universe to help people be more productive. That really wasn't it.
But I think there is a need for that.
Oh, there is a need. There definitely is a need. I very, very much wanted a creative outlet. And I was doing things that were mainly around business entrepreneurship and strategy, which are, I've been with, I think I'm on my 12th startup right now, something like that. And those are really my fields, business leadership and strategy. And I wanted a podcast that I could use as a creative outlet, and I could just be wild and express my personality and be funny. But of course, not in a way where any of my current clients would have a risk of hearing me, because I didn't want them to hear me be creative or interesting. God knows what would happen then. So I chose a topic which I didn't think had anything to do with the main thing that I did, which was the business and the strategy stuff. And I figured, you know what? How about personal productivity? Who in the world would ever listen to that? I can be as creative as I want, and I don't have to risk word getting out. And to me, personal productivity was always something I did with my coaching clients, so they would have enough time to do the leadership and strategy stuff. So to me, it was very much a byproduct of what I did. And then the podcast took off, and much to my surprise, I suddenly had to come up with, at this point, 419 episodes worth of material plus one book. And discovered that I had to really start thinking very hard about productivity and what does it mean and how do you measure it. And I don't necessarily mean how you measure it in some formal metric sense as a company to put something on your annual report. But I mean, if you're a person and you're going into work in a given day, at the end of the day, how do you know if you've been productive? It's real easy if your job is stamping forms, and then at the end of the day, you can count how many forms you stamped and go, oh, look, I stamped 244 forms. That's more than I usually do. I've been extra productive today. But if your job is one that has a large degree of judgment or of thought work or of just dealing with people and managing relationships, how do you know if you've been productive? Was that 3-hour lunch with a major client productive or unproductive? And that led me to ask questions about measurement and questions about just about process. And the more I got into it, the more I came to realize that human beings are just as complicated from the skin in as organizations are. It's just that no one knows how to look inside human beings. And so the more I've gotten into the productivity, what it really becomes is a study of how do human beings get things done, given that all of us are this weird mishmash of different talents, different predilections, different psychoses of willing to say no to things or not willing to say no, or feeling selfish or not feeling selfish, or feeling ownership about things or not feeling ownership, or gee, this has meaning or this doesn't. And it turns out it's that maelstrom of internal human interactions and human impulses that at the end of the day is what I study and what I do. And I simply express that through the lens of, and here is how this complicated psychological phenomenon expresses itself when you're talking about productivity.
And what were some of your takeaways or some of the aha, discoveries?
Probably there are a few of them. One of the interesting ones that I'm not supposed to talk about, but I'll talk about it anyway, is that really becoming personally productive is not it's not going to be good for you unless you're self-employed or you have some way of capturing the output of that productivity. And this is counterintuitive, but here's why. When you become more productive, by definition, you have more time. You get the same amount of work done in less time. Well, now you have some free time. Well, what do you want to do with the free time? I want to put my feet on my desk and read a comic book. Now my boss walks by my office, looks in, sees my feet on the desk reading a comic book. Does my boss think, wow, he's been so productive, I should give him a raise? No. What my boss thinks is, look at that. He's got free time. I must not have given him enough work to justify the salary he's being paid. So let me give him more work, but of course I'm not going to give him a raise because clearly he has a bunch of slack time right now. So now, if you're self-employed, you understand that the reason you have your feet on your desk is because you actually did accomplish a full day's work. You just did it in 4 hours or whatever. So one of the really counterintuitive things that I've discovered about productivity is that the benefits from productivity are not equally distributed. And if you're going to put the effort into becoming more productive, think very carefully about which things you want to become more productive at, and make sure either only do it if you can capture some of the value yourself, but if you're doing it, for example, in a workplace, really sit down and have a clear discussion with the people who measure you so that when that day comes and you have your feet up on your desk, the conclusion is, wow, look how productive he is. Let's promote him and give him more work, not let's just give him more work.
How did you, in the discovery, did you find anything that's changing? We're always talking about the millennials. We're talking about the distractions nowadays. Everyone seems to be on their phone 24/7. How did that enter into the equation?
The way that enters into the equation is that I have met very few human beings in my life for whom in today's environment, a phone or a computer is a productivity tool. It is absolutely true that 15 years ago, phones and computers were productivity tools. And then the entire multi-billion-dollar industry of Silicon Valley discovered that rather than making tools that were useful, it was far more profitable to make tools that were addictive and that tracked us and then sell the data and sell advertising based on the data. And the entire shift, as far as I can tell, of the high-tech industry shifted from let's make useful tools that improve people's lives and get work done to let's make things that people will use long enough that we can then advertise to them or keep them somehow stickily in whatever commerce or lock in their purchasing behavior or any one of a number of things that has nothing to do with productivity, but everything to do with getting people to use computers. So these days, in fact, I just discovered a cool thing, which I'll tell you about in just a second. But these days, one of the things I encourage people to do, and in fact, there's a whole chapter in my book on this, is rather than assuming the technology makes you more productive, measure it. Actually give it a shot and find out which things technology makes you productive for, and there are plenty of things that will make you more productive for, and which ones it doesn't. And the important thing is you actually have to measure the total time it takes you to do something. And if it takes you 10 minutes to write and format a Word document, and then you get distracted and end up doing Facebook for an hour and a half, then what you have to write down in your time log is it took me an hour and 40 minutes to write this paper on a computer, which I could have typed on a typewriter in half an hour, because the distraction counts.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to say, look how productive I'm being, and I'm also being distracted half the time. You have to factor that in the same way that you would factor in a phone call or an interruption back before computers. You would say, oh, well, if you've got 14 meetings that you're going to, and even if you only spend 5 minutes writing that memo, your overall productivity for the day was that 5 minutes divided by 8 hours or whatever. And that's one of the things that people are deeply, deeply addicted to their technology, and they resent any implication that it may not be more useful for them. But I actually measure it. And the things I use technology for, I use the ones that truly make me more productive in a measurable way, because I am self-employed and I have no desire to spend my time fooling myself about what's useful and what isn't. So as a result, now I use a LiveScribe pen and LiveScribe paper, which automatically transcribes my notes into a PDF of the notes. So that way I do have an online searchable version of it. But there is tons of research that shows if you take notes by hand, number one, you can stay connected with the people you're with in the room. For some reason, taking notes on computer actually disconnects you non-verbally from whoever else is in the room, whereas taking notes on paper does not. Second, your recall and the integration of information that you take by hand, even if you take much less complete notes, and this is completely counterintuitive, it's just the way it works, you can take very incomplete notes, but if you take them by hand, you will have much better memory and integration of the material into your psyche versus if you take complete notes by typing into the computer. They don't know why. There's theories as to why. But anyway, so I use, for example, I take paper notes, and my to-do list, I have a large list that is in Todoist. There's a to-do list manager of all the things that I could do today. But each day's to-do list gets written out by hand on paper and stays in front of me all day. If I have to touch a computer to use it, I will get distracted at some point. I might successfully look at my to-do list 6 times on computer and not get distracted, but that 7th time I'm going to get sucked in to the email whose notification popped up on my screen, and I will end up losing an hour. And that more than makes up for any productivity gain that I could have gotten by the 6 times that I showed up and didn't get distracted.
I do the exact same thing. I think you and I were separated at birth for some reason. I'm the same way. Write it out. I get distracted as soon as I start touching the keyboard. So great suggestion.
Yeah. So that's one of my big pieces of advice with technology. The thing I discovered. I totally discovered this by accident. I was playing around with my iPhone accessibility settings because I use one of the accessibility settings as a little feature. And I discovered that you can put your iPhone into grayscale mode where all the color goes away and it's just black and white. And so I just did this and I suddenly noticed, oh, that's ugly. And then I turned it on. And I'm like, it's pretty and bright again. I want to play with it. I was like, wait, hold it, back up, do this again. Ugly, I don't want to play with it. Pretty, I do want to play with it. Ugly, I can put it down. Pretty, I want to go find a Pokemon. And this happened like 3 days ago. And so now I have it set up so that I can, with just a couple of taps of the screen, I can switch between grayscale and full color. And when I decide that I want to go into focus mode, or at the end of the workday when I don't want to be attached to my phone anymore, I turn it to grayscale. And all of a sudden, and I don't know if this is universal or if this is just me and my own idiosyncratic behavior, but all of a sudden when it's in grayscale, I'm like, yay, it's in grayscale, and it's no longer compelling. I can put it down and put my attention on the world around me instead of putting my attention in this tiny little box that isn't actually serving me very well.
I love it. I'll give that a try. Never heard that suggestion.
Yeah, it's a cool one.
So we have a couple topics that we want to discuss today. I know we could probably spend 3 hours on each one of them, but let's just dive into the first one. We spoke earlier about identity and how important that is to someone's overall success. Tell us a little bit about your views on it.
Sure. Okay, so first of all, identity, let me define what I mean when I say identity. People have ways of thinking about themselves, and any way that you would fill in the blank, I am a blank, or I am blank, that's an identity state. So I am a carpenter. A lot of people have an identity. I have an identity that is attached to their profession. And what's very interesting, I've known a number of entrepreneurs who have sold their companies, and they've sold them after building them for 10, 15, 20 years. And what happens is they go into a profound depression. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to spend their time. And when you talk to them, what they will say is things like, well, I used to be an entrepreneur and I don't know what I am now. And that's an identity statement. What they're saying is, I used to have an identity and my identity became, I am an entrepreneur. And that identity carries with it all kinds of it carries with it baggage, but it also carries with it all kinds of power. It tells you, if your identity is you're an entrepreneur, that tells you what topics to talk about with people. That tells you what kinds of people you want to meet. It tells you the social role that you play in your community and in the microcosm of people who you interact with. And if you lose that identity for some reason, like because you shut down your company, all of a sudden now you either need to be able to find a new identity to shift to, or you will probably, and this is what an awful lot of entrepreneurs do, although far from all of them, but you will probably start another company. Not because you necessarily want to, but because your identity as an entrepreneur, in essence, requires you to do that, to maintain that identity. Yeah.
And our desire and need to stay consistent with that identity.
Yes, very much. Now, profession as identity is almost trite, right? Because we've all seen or heard of that kind of thing happening. The place where it gets a lot more subtle and a lot more powerful is when you have identities that are, I am or I am not the kind of person who does X. So I have talked to people who I have this one person who has come to me multiple times for coaching. He's never signed up, but he loves to investigate the process. And he always has some excuse as to why now is not the right time for him to be an entrepreneur. And the last time he came to me, he was, I think, 37 or 38 years old, and he had just had 2 small children. And now the reason that it wasn't the right time to be an entrepreneur is I now have these 2 small children. And I was like, dude, you're 37 years old. You just had kids. Your kids are not going to be grown until you're 55 years old. And at that point, will you be ready? I'm like, for 10 years, you have always had some kind of excuse. And he's like, well, I'm actually not the kind of person who can take risks. And just that one sentence tells me 2 things. One is having the identity as a non-risk taker, and I know that one of the 3 topics we're going to talk about is how do you even think about risk taking and what is and isn't risky. But one of the other parts to that sentence coming from him was, number 1, he's not a risk taker. So I know there's an identity level thing here that is holding him back. Number 2 is that he is also implying that entrepreneurship means taking risks.
Yes.
And that's a whole separate conversation, except in some of the research that's been done on the personality types of entrepreneurs. In fact, entrepreneurs are not risk takers. Most entrepreneurs are very, very good at figuring out how to build safety nets for themselves.
Absolutely.
And they do what may appear to outsiders to be to take risks, but when I hear people talk about risk taking and they work at some corporate job and they tell me about, those entrepreneurs, you know what, my division got sold today and I just got laid off.
Yeah. Talk about risk. Exactly.
Right. And by the way, I have no network outside of my company because that's where I've been for 15 years. I have no skill set. I don't know how to hustle. I don't know how to call people. I'm at a complete and total loss for what to do. So I'm going to get depressed now.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that seems pretty risky to me, But again, part of that is identity. I'm an employee versus I'm an entrepreneur, and part of it is not knowing how to assess risk. But for me, in my coaching business, one of those powerful kinds of work that I will do with people is when I hear them adopting a certain identity or not adopting a certain identity, I'll really push them to explore that, because there was a person, right, Harvard MBA, who had grown like what did you call it? What would it? Multi-$10 million. She's built
multiple 8-figure businesses.
Yes, excellent. She's built multiple 8-figure businesses. You're a very wise man. She's built multiple 8-figure businesses, and she came to me describing a situation she had with the startup that she was doing with a partner, and she kept saying, now she was the founder of this business. And she kept talking about asking her partner for permission to do different things. And this was such incongruous for me. I finally said, why do you have to ask your partner? You're the founder of the company. This is not. And she realized with a shock that because she had always worked in a corporate environment before, she had built $20 million businesses, but she had built them within the context of a large organization where they said, go open this market or go create this product. She still thought of herself as an employee. And even though she was the founder of the company, she had a partner. The partner was the only other person in the room. Therefore, that person must be her boss since she's an employee. So she will, if her identity is employee, she will find someone to fill the role of boss for her. And she simply mentally put her partner in the role of boss.
Yeah. It's amazing how those belief systems will creep in and you don't even see them. It's so important to have somebody around you that can see those things.
Oh gosh, yes. And this is one of the reasons that any outside point of view can be valuable. You want someone who just doesn't share the common culture and language that you've created in your business, because the strengths of having a common culture and language is that everyone becomes aligned, but the weaknesses is people become aligned along some invisible dimensions that they're not even aware of, and then you start to take those invisible dimensions as givens rather than as decisions you made or as things that can be altered. And you just need someone to come up and go, have you tried thinking of yourself as the boss, given that you do own the company?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's a new way of looking at it. Yes. And if you were to look at it that way now, just out of curiosity, what would you do differently? Oh, I'd march into her office and I would inform her that here's the new strategic plan. Great. Sounds like a plan. Give it a shot. See what happens.
Go get it done.
Exactly.
Being a peak performer is all about execution. Think of those people that you know that you consider peak performers. Some have had great plans, some are really smart, some just have natural talent, and others are highly educated. But the one thing that they all have in common, and I don't even know who you're thinking about, they all know how to execute. If they can't execute, they would not be considered a peak performer. Everybody has dreams, but peak performers actually execute them. This applies on the field, in athletics, or in the boardroom. If you're a business owner, a coach, an entrepreneur, or a corporate executive, and you're frustrated and tired of knowing what to do, but you just can't seem to get it all done, or your results are inconsistent, or maybe you're really good at execution, but your team doesn't know how to execute. Are you missing budget? Are you working 80 hours a week and it seems like you're just banging your head up against the wall every day? I know I've been there. Are you not making the kind of money that you want and deserve? I have a program that just might be the answer for you. This program is not for everyone. We go deep, we get raw, we get real. But if you're truly committed to mastering execution and for the first time truly being able to execute on what you know, as opposed to just trying to figure out more information and looking for that secret, we will teach you to become a master of execution. We'll teach you the science of getting things done. Simply take your phone and text the word BE Summit, one word, to 41411. That's Business Execution Summit. The keyword, BE Summit, that's what you text, and text it to 41411. Remember, it's not what you know. It's not even who you know. It's about what you're able to execute. That's what truly matters. Don't let another month, another quarter, or another year slip by with just average results. Text today. That concludes part 1 of our interview with Steve Robbins. Please tune in later this week for part 2. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already done so, please head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Also, please share this with family, friends, coworkers, or anyone that could benefit from this information. To make it very easy to share these episodes, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode that you want to share, and you can post it to your timeline. You just might be helping one of your friends on Facebook by sharing it on your page. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. The email is info@thorconklin. While at the website, please sign up for our weekly newsletter with additional tricks, tips, tools, and psychology on how to be a peak performer. Remember, these episodes are anywhere between 6 and 35 minutes and are meant to be consumed during dot time doing other things. Until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.